welcome to Money for Breakfast.
Charles, thanks so much. You know, we talked about one of the big stories of the week, of course, being General Motors. There's so much uncertainty about the future for both GM and Chrysler. GM saying when it emerges from its restructuring, the automaker will be back on the stock market. There's speculation that once private, Chrysler could be public again as well. So what will be better for the auto industry, buying an American car or buying stock in a new American car company? Well, the U.S. government may be hoping for both. Who better to ask? The perfect surname, at least. Let's ask Lauren Fix, the car coach and Car Care Council spokesperson. And Lauren, thanks so much for joining us here.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So what is
now
better?
You asked about, should I buy?
What is better? Yeah, what's better, to buy the stock or to buy the car?
Or the stock? Well, I'm not interested in either one, to be totally honest with you, because I don't want a car that the government's going to tell us what we want to drive. And that's exactly what your previous guest said. This is going to be a disaster in the making, especially for the Democratic Party, because they put Geithner in charge. They've got the Automotive Task Force that has no experience in the auto industry, and they're going to be sitting on the board of directors at GM owning 70% of government motors, is what everybody's calling it in the industry now. And it's scaring everyone because we'll probably be forced to purchase hybrid cars that go 40 miles an hour that only go 40 miles until it needs to be recharged. Technology is not there. You can't push technology, and people won't buy these cars unless they're forced to buy these cars.
And being forced to buy,
you're saying in a company like this is a mistake.
Sure, and you're saying the only reason they'd be forced to is that they'll be the only options, and/or heavily incentives are subsidized to get you to buy it versus buying a foreign competing car, even if those are made here in the States.
Right. Well, I think this is what I see coming. If you look at cap and trade right now, that's coming through. If it has $3,100 taxed on each family, where are we going to come up with the extra money in order to buy the cars that we may want or may need to meet our family needs? On the other hand, this energy policy is right behind it. We don't know when that's going to pass. I'm saying, and this is, I don't have any ins at the government because I try to avoid all politics at any cost, but apparently it looks like it's going to be about $1 to $2 in there, hidden in there somewhere, that we're going to be taxed in gasoline. Now, you watch that come down and gas becomes $4 a gallon, like you're starting to hear a lot of people say, oh, that's a great idea. It's a bad idea. Consumers can't afford it, which means they're forced to sell their cars that meet their needs to buy hybrid cars that they may not want. And if gas prices ever go back down, then you're stuck with a car that nobody wants, and look at all the cars that are sitting on the lots.
So, Lauren, it sounds like you would be short of stock when it came back to the market here, indeed, in the future time, and would not be a buyer at all of any of the new cars then.
No, actually, I would say right now Ford's probably the only one that's really paying attention of the three domestic manufacturers. They're doing a world global platform where they're bringing in the Ford Fiesta and a lot of other cars. The new Taurus, the 2010 Taurus, is amazing if you haven't seen it. I was totally impressed that that came out of Ford when you used to see, the typical Taurus. So you're watching that. Plus, you've got the imports coming into the market with diesel that gets 58 miles to the gallon. I mean, you're seeing the VW commercials out there. You've got Audi, BMW, Mercedes. And diesel is the answer to the demand on fuel in Europe. And if we start bringing in diesel vehicles where the technology is already developed, where vehicles can go 400,000 miles, which will save consumers money of buying new cars, this would be something that we should consider rather than putting a ton of money in ethanol. Everybody switches their fields over to corn. We build a bunch of ethanol plants that now sit stagnant in the Midwest. Then we stop that and switch to hydrogen after GM and Ford came with these great hydrogen vehicles, including General Motors Equinox, which I drove. And now they're saying, oh, no, we're not going to do hydrogen either. They've got to pick a direction, and I think that's the problem. When the government gets involved, they're telling us what we want. And I don't want to buy stock in a company that's going to tell me what I want without even asking me.
Yeah, I hear that. And speaking of, we just saw some video of the Hummer here. If you had to buy GM stock, a Hummer or a Saturn car, it sounds like maybe you're favoring the Hummer there, not liking the smaller cars.
Well, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Saturn right now, but it looks like that one of the import manufacturers, possibly even Renault, would purchase the dealer network, therefore not producing the Saturn car anymore, which always had great marketing and great distribution, really great dealers, but they bring their vehicles into that network. And that's what every European manufacturer wants. They want a footprint in the U.S. marketplace, because if you make it in the U.S., you can make it anywhere in the world. And that's why you're watching Fiat trying to get in Chrysler for the same reason. They want a footprint back in the States. We haven't seen Fiat since, what, the 80s?
Yeah, exactly. Since the 80s. GM, of course, ironically had a big stake in it and basically had to bail out on that.
Right.
Speaking of the dealer networks, what does the future of buying cars look like here in the States? We've got dealerships being closed down pretty much across the nation here. You've got, you're talking about the dealership for Saturn being perhaps snapped up by a foreign automaker. What's the dynamic going to be like when you go out shopping for a car in the next year or two?
I think there are going to be a lot more choices, but maybe less within each brand. I mean, you're talking about 789 Chrysler dealerships closing June 9th. You know, by the end of 2010, we're looking at, right now, they've already said 1,100 GM dealers. I have a feeling it's going to be even more than that. Once GMs get switched over to being 70% owned by the government, they're going to shut down a lot of these dealer networks. It costs money for co-op advertising. The dealer itself is pretty self-sustained, and they purchase product and they sell product, and there's money changing hands both ways. But the big thing that it's such a burden on the corporation to have this many dealers. When you're looking at Toyota, where the average dealer will sell maybe 700, 800 cars, you were looking at the average GM dealer only selling 100 to 200 cars. And the ones that were selling 100 or less, those are the ones that got their pink slips. And so you're going to watch a lot of change and dynamic. And for consumers, right now is a great time to buy a car if you need one, if you can afford one, and if you can get the credit for one. Because 6 months to a year from now, when everything settles down and everybody's back to making cars, there's going to be less vehicles out there. And again, back to basic economics, supply and demand. The demand will be down, the supply is going to be down, and when the demand increases, there won't be enough cars, and therefore the prices won't be as flexible. So when you go to say, hey, let's negotiate, that's going to disappear.
All right, Lauren Fix, thanks so much for joining us here. Charles?
Well, we think the drama is almost over. It's just getting started.